legal journalist at News 24. Karen Mourne's been tracking this very complicated court case, and she joins us now live. Karen, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is certainly one of those cases that South Africa has been enthralled with, right? Did you get the sense that the Supreme Court of Appeal judge was swayed at all by Jason Rhode's legal team?
Well, just before I answer that question, on your last issue, I'm a type 1 diabetic and I got COVID, and I fully believe that being vaccinated saved my life. So particularly those people with comorbidities, I know 2 other diabetics who passed away because they weren't vaccinated. And I would just urge anyone to get vaccinated because it really is life-saving.
Yeah.
On your second question, and sorry for hijacking your
No,
interview.
well done. Thank you for doing that. It's important.
No, it's important. We can't keep losing people unnecessarily to something that is completely, we can be saved from. And vaccination is life-saving. I know that for myself. I wouldn't have survived were it not for vaccination. On the second issue, Judge Ian van der Merwe, who I think is very likely to be the judge who writes the ruling, made it very clear that the court was not necessarily convinced that Jason Rhode was not responsible for his wife's death during the questioning that occurred yesterday. But the real dispute here is over the fact that Judge Sali Hlophe, Gayatri Sali Hlophe, when she wrote her judgment, made a number of findings about the way in which the murder had unfolded, in her view, that both the state and, in some respects, Judge van der Merwe, acknowledging that those findings were unsubstantiated. For example, saying that Jason Rhode had smothered his wife with a pillow, that there had been a whole progress, a violent altercation, that he had hit her, that he had unleashed a torrent of violence on her, saying that there were aspects of that weren't necessarily substantiated by the evidence, and making it very clear that the court was very strongly considering finding that Susan Rhode had died as a consequence of manual asphyxiation, strangulation, but that certain of the other aspects of the evidence, specifically in regards to this issue of the violent altercation and the smothering might not necessarily be sustained by the evidence, suggesting also to Rhode's lawyers that as a consequence of a finding that this may have been, quote unquote, a crime of passion, the court would then reconsider his sentence.
I mean, it's interesting that they make that distinction between what would be considered murder and a crime of passion. But part of the discussion as well was around Jason Rhode's behavior prior to that fateful day and whether or not he was, in fact, an abusive husband. What came out of that evidence?
Well, that's one of the key aspects of the forensic dispute, right? Because the state said Susan Rhode had certain injuries on her body, on her thighs. There was an injury above her eye, on her feet. That very much indicated that she had been subjected to, kind of violence and was a battered woman. Now, the defense has said, the injury on her thighs was a consequence of having a dumbbell drop on her. They said that evidence is undisputed, that the original court did not give proper weight to that. They're saying that there are innocent explanations for a lot of the injuries sustained. But one of the things that van der Merwe picked up on very strongly yesterday was the fact that she had 250 milliliters of blood, I think in her stomach and intestine, that she had ingested while still alive. That concerned him a great deal. And he was unconvinced by the defense's evidence that that was a result of nosebleeds or potentially as a consequence of the intense CPR that she had been subjected to, prior to her death. So, you could see the court there are forensic disputes here, I think substantive forensics disputes. And I think that when the court considers this, it may well decide to take that kind of aspect of evidence off the table and say, look, we believe there is evidence, forensic evidence that demonstrates, for example, bruising on her neck, that demonstrates that she was manually asphyxiated, that we believe that that is sustainable on the evidence. We're not going to get into some of the disputed forensic evidence about whether or not there was an altercation, as a way of sort of saying, you know, taking the more disputable stuff off the table, but saying we believe that based on these particular set of facts, this particular evidence, it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she was manually asphyxiated.
Yeah, well, 2016 was a very long time ago in the case. I mean, it's been dragging for a while. If this doesn't work for Jason Rhode, what's next?
Well, he can attempt to go to the Constitutional Court and argue that his fair trial rights were violated in this case. His lawyers have remained adamant that Judge Gayet Salih-Lope acted in a way that violated his fair trial rights, that she didn't consider forensic evidence that may have exonerated him or supported his arguments that Susan Rhode took her own life as a consequence of his infidelity. They may opt to go to the Constitutional Court, but, you know, we've seen in the past Oscar Pistorius attempting to bring an application with regards to his conviction for murder under dolus eventualis in the eNCA, and the court not necessarily being disposed to entertain that. But I mean, it will really be about the strength of his argument, whether he feels or whether the court feels ultimately that he's raised issues around his constitutional rights that would bear hearing. Of course, this is in the event that the SCA does find that he was correctly convicted and may or may not interfere with his sentence based on that finding.
Yeah, well, things, they're getting quite technical, but I really do appreciate you speaking to us and keeping us on top of that story. That was Karen Moore, legal journalist at News 24. We do appreciate your time.